Photographers caught what appeared to be the ideal political marriage when Ethel Kennedy stood next to her husband at campaign rallies. She raised 11 children while he left a legacy, smiled for the cameras, and held his hand during speeches. This is what those pictures didn't show, though. Ethel was aware. She was aware of the actresses from Hollywood. She was aware of the pals from the family. She was aware of affairs that would cause most women to leave and never return. Even worse, she was aware of it before she married him. Robert F. Kennedy was not a one-time cheater. Throughout their marriage, he had several affairs, all of which his wife knew about. Bobby's infidelity was well known, especially among close family friends, great movie actors, and even his own sister-in-law. Ethel stayed, nevertheless. She brought up their large family. Betrayal after betrayal went unnoticed by her. Who Bobby cheated with isn't the only question. That's why Ethel decided to put up with it all. You'll realize that the truth is far more nuanced than you initially believed by the end of this video. Since treachery isn't how Ethel's story starts, let's start at the beginning. It starts with a decision. She was raised as the daughter of an affluent family, Ethel Skakel, and she became acquainted with the Kennedys through their social networks. This was no innocent young lady who happened to stumble into a poisonous circumstance. She was fully aware of what she was getting herself into. The Kennedys were known for something. It was clear to everyone around them that faithfulness wasn't exactly a family value. The patriarch Joseph Kennedy Sr. served as an example of this conduct for his boys. He ran his affairs in a way that was so transparent that everyone knew about them, and he inherited that mindset from his children. The Kennedy playbook was essentially predicated on infidelity. There were unwritten standards that you had to follow if you wished to marry into this dynasty. Don't speak. Keep up appearances. Don't let it become a public controversy. Regardless of what's going on behind closed doors, smile for the cameras. Regardless, Ethel fell in love with Bobby. When she was young enough to think that love might triumph over all obstacles, they were married on June 17, 1950, and others who knew her said she really loved him. According to one biography, she loved him more deeply than she ever imagined. Intense love like that might make you put up with things you never would have imagined. It can lead you to justify actions that would be inappropriate in any other situation. You must comprehend something about Bobby's initial encounter before we can discuss his affairs, though, as it sets the tone for everything that transpired. In fact, when Bobby was barely 21 years old, his father paid for him to go to a brothel in Harlem, according to historian Larry Tye. As if it were a coming-of-age ceremony, Joseph Kennedy basically bought his son's sexual initiation by setting up his son to have sex with an African-American woman. Bobby's evaluation afterward was strikingly icy and disinterested. He claimed that while it wasn't horrible, it wasn't really amazing either, as if he were evaluating a restaurant dish rather than a personal encounter. Something significant about Bobby's approach to relationships is shown by his flippant dismissal and transactional viewpoint. The remainder of his life. He married Ethel a year later. Her age was 22. They had their first child by 1951. Together, they would eventually have 11 children, which seems like the cornerstone of a solid family, and in some respects it was. However, in the midst of raising a family, pursuing a career in politics, moving up the ranks from attorney general to senator, and acting as the Kennedy golden boy, Bobby managed to make time for numerous other women. The trend began early and continued for a long time. And even though Ethel knew, even though it was humiliating, and even though she was raising almost a dozen children who needed solid parents, she decided to stay. This leads us to the actual women. Bobby frequently has a Hollywood taste in extramarital relationships. He didn't just start having affairs with women he met at bars. These were strategic relationships with some of America's most well-known ladies. And while the rest of the nation was largely in the dark, Ethel somehow knew about them. Among them was Kim Novak. For those who are unfamiliar with the history of Hollywood, Novak was a huge star in the 1950s. She became one of Hollywood's biggest box office attractions after signing with Columbia Pictures in 1954. We're discussing big-budget movies like Alfred, Hitchcock's Vertigo, Pal Joey, and Picnic. She was the kind of lady who made women jealous and men uneasy, the kind of actress who defined an era. According to some, the affair took place in 1961 during Bobby's tenure as Attorney General in his brother's government. Consider the danger there. He wasn't a regular person. Second only to the president, He was one of the most powerful men in the nation and was continuing with a Hollywood star. As is common in these Kennedy cases, there are few details concerning their relationship. Although the family became quite adept at keeping things under wraps, several sources attest to their involvement, although briefly. Later, Novak virtually stopped being involved in Hollywood, which always seems odd considering how successful she was. She later settled in Oregon with Robert Malaloy, an equine veterinarian, after getting married twice. Until his passing in 2020, they shared a log cabin. Although she never discussed Bobby in public, the rumors persisted. The memory of Hollywood is long. Lee Remick came next. Days of Wine and Roses got this actress a nomination for an Academy Award. For Wait Until Dark on Broadway, she received a Tony Award. Classics such as Anatomy of a Murder in the Omen featured her. She was married to her, talented and gorgeous. Bill Colleran, her first husband, when she supposedly started dating Robert Kennedy in the early 1960s. Remick allegedly had an affair with Bobby while she and her producer husband were still raising 2 kids. You may ask how she managed to juggle it all because the period coincides with some of her most significant professional events. While making big-budget films and keeping up the illusion of a loving marriage, they had secret meetings with the Attorney General. The mere thought of it is exhausting. Later, in 1970, she wed British producer William Rory Gowans, with whom she remained until her death in 1991 from kidney cancer. She was only 55. She never officially acknowledged the affair, just like Novak. However, many close to both families were aware. They were constantly aware. This is where things get really nasty, though. For Claudine Long was more than a Hollywood actress Bobby had met at a party. Andy Williams, a well-known singer and TV host, was her spouse. Furthermore, the two couples were close friends rather than acquaintances or people who happened to periodically cross paths, close companions. Together, they went on Salmon River cruises in the summer. They went to each other's houses in Hickory Hill, Virginia, and Bear, Palm Springs, New York City. Together, the children played. The spouses talked about their families. The husbands talked about entertainment and politics. They were the type of buddies who got together for holidays. Take a moment to consider that dynamic. Andy and Claudine would host Bobby and Ethel on the weekends. They would pretend to be a happy couple, enjoying their accomplishments and good fortune while dining, boating, and swimming in pools. Furthermore, Bobby and Claudine crossed a line that should never have been crossed in 1967. Crossed. Although it didn't continue long, the purported affair took place that year right in front of everyone. Long and Williams both hurried to Good Samaritan Hospital with the Kennedys after Bobby was shot at the Ambassador Hotel on June 5, 1968. As medical professionals attempted to save his life, they stood watch. Bobby passed away early the following morning, surrounded by his loved ones. In his honor, Lange and Williams later gave their son the name Robert, which begs the uneasy question. Andy Williams, were you aware of the affair? How did Ethel feel standing next to the woman who had slept with her husband if he didn't? They were all grieving together. They were all behaving as though their bond had never been damaged. It's nearly impossible to imagine the amount of deceit needed to keep those relationships going. For years, rumors of Marilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy circulated. Almost too scandalous to be true, the rumors seemed. An active attorney general's relationship with the world's most well-known actress. It had the sound of tabloid fiction. Everything changed when a letter appeared. Jean Kennedy Smith, the sister of Bobby and JFK, wrote the 2-page letter. Sometime in the early 1960s, she penned it. In it, she also conveyed her sincere happiness that Monroe and her brother Bobby were a popular new couple. As if promoting a promising new romance, she even recommended that Monroe accompany Kennedy when he returned to the East Coast. This was not tabloid conjecture. This was not a rumor propagated by adversaries of Kennedy. His own sister was recognizing the affair in writing, as if her married brother's relationship with another lady were quite natural. There are pictures of Bobby and Marilyn together at different occasions. They appear to be more than just casual acquaintances as they stand near to one another, smiling and seeming at ease. However, this is the instance that seems to have tested Ethel's limits. Marilyn performed that well-known seductive rendition of Happy Birthday at JFK's infamous 45th birthday celebration in 1962. That performance is remembered by all. She made Happy Birthday sound seductive with her breathy voice and tight outfit. It's among the most recognizable events in the history of American popular culture. The aftermath of the party is something that isn't discussed as much. Lou Harris, who was present that evening, claims that Marilyn made the advances on Bobby directly in front of everyone. She was extremely forceful in her flirtation, he said, literally pressing Bobby against the wall, making it clear to everyone that something was happening between them. Ethel witnessed it all. As hundreds of others pretended not to notice, she stood there sipping her drink and watching another lady shamelessly seek her husband. She told others that what she had just observed was the most repulsive thing she had ever seen, and she was so incensed that she left the party right once. The majority of wives would have immediately wanted a divorce. The majority of women would have raised an alarm, confronted Marilyn and Bobby, and refused to continue this degrading act. Angry, Ethel returned home, but she stayed. She was never gone. Keeping her cool and playing the part of the loyal wife, she repressed her anger. The specifics of Bobby and Marilyn's connection are still not entirely understood. Physical evidence of how far things proceeded is lacking. Monroe passed away before she could write a candid biography, and Bobby was definitely not the kind to record his indiscretions. However, his sister's letter, the pictures, the incident at the birthday party, and the fact that other people from that time period attest to their involvement all point to something more than friendship. The rumors were further fueled by Monroe's untimely death in August 1962, which occurred only a few months later. Although there is no solid proof, some conspiracy theories even contend that the Kennedys had some role in her demise. It's obvious that Marilyn had been too close, knew too much, and was starting to cause problems. Conveniently, her passing resolved an issue that would have brought down the Kennedy political apparatus, the final treachery that lasted 4 years. If having an affair with a Hollywood actress was difficult, the consequences were catastrophic, because it wasn't a stranger with whom Bobby had his longest and most important romance. Ethel didn't go out with a stranger. It was with Jackie Kennedy, the First Lady of the United States, his own sister-in-law, and the widow of his brother who was killed. The killing of JFK in November 1963 caused Bobby to completely collapse. He wasn't simply grieving in the traditional way. He experienced what is now known as a total nervous breakdown. In his office, he created a physical shrine to his brother, complete with pictures, books, and mementos of all they had lost. Like a protective talisman, he wore JFK's bomber jacket with the presidential seal emblazoned on it. He took his car to Times daily to visit the grave at Arlington National Cemetery, as though his brother might still be there, as though gazing at the eternal flame would bring him back. Bobby gnawed his fingernails till they were bleeding. In photos taken at the time, he seemed haggard and hollow-eyed due to his drastic weight loss. He was only able to sleep for a few hours at a time, and previous injury that never completely healed tormented him. The anguish serves as a physical reminder of loss all the time. And in his sorrow, he turned to the worst place for solace as he drowned in despair, remorse, and anger at the world. He looked at Jackie. The purported 4-year affair started soon after the assassination. 4 years. This wasn't a fleeting moment of vulnerability. There weren't two individuals looking for consolation right after a traumatic event. Every member of the Kennedy family was aware of this ongoing relationship, but chose to disregard it. JFK's Undersecretary of Commerce, Franklin Roosevelt Jr., who was close to the family, subsequently claimed that Bobby and Jackie continued to act like adolescent lovers. They weren't tactful. They did not exercise caution. In front of Bobby's 11 children, Ethel, and everyone else who should have mattered, they behaved as though they were in love. Roosevelt conjectured that if it had been politically and spiritually feasible, Bobby would have most likely divorced Ethel in order to wed Jackie, but it was obviously not. The Kennedys were Catholic. Bobby's political future would have been ruined by divorce, as would his chances of becoming president and being married to his brother's widow. That would have been unredeemably scandalous. As a result, the affair persisted in secret, unknown to the general public but known to those closest to them. According to one account, Jackie, not Ethel, Bobby's wife of 18 years and mother of his 11 children, gave the order for physicians to remove Bobby's life support when he was shot at the Ambassador Hotel in 1968 after winning the California Democratic primary. That choice was made by Jackie, which reveals just who was in charge in Bobby's heart in the end. Imagine what it must have been like for Ethel at that moment. Her spouse is dying. His kids are all around her. They were all crying. They are all looking to her for support. And the one making life or death choices is the lady who has been having affairs with her husband for 4 years. The lady who deceived her and ruined her marriage's potential for genuine closeness is behaving as though Bobby's primary relative. Bobby's children and the rest of the Kennedy family were standing there with Ethel. They were all well aware that her husband had spent years falling in love with someone else. Still, she remained silent. As the loyal wife, she grieved in public, preserved her honor, and guarded his memory as if nothing had ever happened. The question that everyone asks is this one. Ethel stayed, but why? Why put up with decades of public shame, treachery, and humiliation? In a marriage that was essentially shattered, why raise 11 children? Why defend a man who obviously didn't value her enough to stick by her side? The answer is straightforward. She loved him. She was telling the truth when she said in that biography that her love for Bobby was more comprehensive than she ever imagined it could be. Despite his imperfections, she truly loved this man. Some people believe that suffering is worthwhile because they love so much. The positives outweigh the negatives, they convince themselves. That their family, which they created together, is more important than loyalty, because sacrifice is a necessity of love. It's not only love, though. Ethel wed a member of the Kennedy family. Power, prestige, and a platform that most people never receive came with that. She was Ethel Kennedy, a senator's wife, the attorney general's wife, and a possible first lady. She had access to America's most powerful individuals. She had the power to actually change the things she cared about. She had an important voice. All of that would have been lost if Bobby had been divorced. She would have been shunned, branded as the woman who couldn't cope with being a Kennedy spouse. Her inability to satisfy her spouse would have made her a permanent footnote. Her reputation would have vanished. Her children would have grown up in a broken home, which carried significant social shame in the 1960s, while the doors that had opened for her would have slammed shut. And there are those 11 children. Having that many kids makes it difficult to just leave. Ethel put their stability ahead of her own wounded sentiments. Despite the fact that the family was founded on falsehoods, she made the decision to keep it together. In order to preserve their affluent lifestyle and to enjoy all the benefits that came with being a Kennedy, she wanted them to have 2 parents at home. The Kennedy Code comes next. Every member of that family realized that your top priority is to defend the dynasty. Dirty laundry is not something you air. Scandals that harm the political brand are not something you start. You put on a united front, circle the wagons, and keep the dysfunction that is simmering beneath the surface hidden from outsiders. Ethel was aware that speaking up would ruin Bobby's political career, legacy, and the future of his kids, everything he had worked so hard to achieve. She therefore kept silent, performed the part that was required of her, and endured her suffering in secret. When Bobby was killed in 1968, Ethel had to make a different decision. A tell-all book could have been written by her. She had the opportunity to reveal all of his extramarital affairs, reveal identities, and demolish the meticulously constructed Kennedy mythology. Millions would have been paid by publishers. It would have been a best-selling novel. She could have avenged herself, atoned for her sins, and made money off of her suffering. Rather, she dedicated the remainder of her life to safeguarding his legacy. She was the only one who reared their kids. She continued to support social initiatives Bobby was passionate about. She kept up relationships with the same people who had deceived her, went to Kennedy family events, and kept quiet about what she had gone through. She carried the secrets for 56 years after his death, until 2024. It's referred to as strength. Others may refer to it by a different name. Ethel Kennedy, however, made a deliberate choice regarding her priorities. She opted for silence over justice, family over self-respect, and legacy above the truth. She came to the conclusion that being a Kennedy, even one who had been deceived and humiliated, was preferable than being nothing. The brothers Kennedy are regarded as political royalty in the United States. Their affairs are discussed in passing but are rarely thoroughly investigated. Bobby is hailed as a civil rights activist, a voice for the underprivileged, and a political martyr who was killed before he could reach his full potential. And Ethel wanted it just that way. With a smile on her face for the cameras, she paid the price for their immortality, one affair at a time. What matters most to you will likely determine whether you view her as a partner or a victim. Was she a woman confined by uncontrollable circumstances? Or did her refusal to set limits allow Bobby to act in this way? Did she give up something for the sake of her kids? Or was self-respect less important to her than position and power? The answer is not simple. But she was sure of one thing. She was aware of Bobby Kennedy's character from the day she married him until the day of her passing. She was aware of his father's planned visit to a brothel. She was aware of Claudine Long, Lee Remick, and Kim Novak. She was aware that at JFK's birthday celebration, Marilyn Monroe had pinned him to a wall. Despite being aware of her 4-year affair with Jackie, which should have been inexcusable, she decided to stay. That's the true tale. The reason Ethel felt that being Mrs. Robert F. Kennedy was more valuable than her own happiness, dignity, and peace of mind, not who Bobby cheated with. For decades, she repeatedly made that decision. She never publicly regretted that decision, and she carried it with her to the end.